Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Nate. I also go by Hockey Boy Nate, and today we are finally here at the long-awaited severe weather event that's going to be happening here today, other known as Tuesday, April 27th, all the way into tomorrow, Wednesday, April 28th. So if you guys are new to my channel, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, share this with friends and family and on social media. Also follow me on social medias, and that would be greatly appreciated. I do have timestamps in the video so that you guys can go to specific parts if you need to. So here is Tuesday's outlook. I'm going to be talking about mainly just the slight risks. I won't be talking about the other areas, but they can get a marginal risk for severe weather, which is indicated in the green. Then we also have Wednesday, which we'll be talking about this giant slight risk here, as well as going into parts of Arkansas. We also will be talking about the Northeast because something could be stirring over there. So if you guys want to skip over to that, then you guys can. But for right now, we're going to talk about what's happening today. This is the day one outlook issued by the Storm Prediction Center. A couple slight risks that have been issued here. So one massive one extending from southern parts of Kansas all the way down towards Del Rio, Texas, through Oklahoma. So if you guys live here in places like Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Lubbock, Abilene, all the way down into Del Rio, you guys have a 2 out of 5 chance of seeing severe weather. You also have a slight risk up here that is just to the east of Denver, near Colby and McCook, over near Nebraska, Colorado, and Kansas. There is a small chance for tornadoes up there, but you still have that slight risk potential for hail within that general vicinity. Speaking of hail, here's the hail outlook. You can see the brown is indicated in a 5%, which is the reason why I said you have a marginal chance for severe weather if you're in the brown. Then you also have your yellows, which is indicated as a 15%. So whatever probability you have, whether it's a 5% or a 15% chance, that's the probability of you getting hail within with 1 inch or larger within 25 miles of a point. You also have your significant severe risk right here, this hatched risk that we like to call, with this black circle and the dotted lines in the middle. And this can signify that there could be some areas that have a 10% chance or greater probability of getting 2-inch size hail or larger, and that could easily damage property, even hurt people if they're outdoors during these storms. So if you're in these areas, you're definitely not going to want to go outside. Lubbock, Wichita Falls, Lawton, Oklahoma, Del Rio, Eagle Pass, those general vicinities, I'd highly recommend staying indoors and even bringing in your cars to some sort of cover like a garage, because if you put a tarp over it, it will not work, or not work as well as you think it will, because these hailstones can break windows and windshields and dent cars, and even hurt, pets and stuff like that that may be left outside during these storms. So please consider that moving on forward today. Then you also have your wind risk, not as significant here. You guys might have noticed that the hail risk up here in Nebraska, Colorado, and Kansas is the reason why it's driving the slight risk. But for wind, not as significant here. 5% chance for the most part, and then the 15% chance here within the main slight risk. So whatever probability you have that chance of getting 58 mile per hour wind gusts or greater within 25 miles of a point. And so if you live in these areas, you really need to monitor that. Won't be your main risk, but you still have a chance for some gusty winds. Then we also have our tornado risk, and here is something that's pretty interesting for the most part. I mentioned that there was a tornado risk up here for Kansas, Nebraska, and Colorado. You also have your widespread 2% here in the Southern Plains with bits and bobs of a 5%. You can see there's a 5% over here for Wichita Falls, again, which is actually the area in which, if we were to live stream here today, which we probably will, our chaser is most likely going to be going out to Wichita Falls, and he's probably going to sit within that area, maybe a bit further west to try and sit within that general vicinity, because that does seem to have the higher likelihood of where the tornadoes would spawn for this event. You also have your 5% down here in Del Rio, and I'll be mentioning Del Rio quite a bit later on in the video. But Del Rio is also in the new additional 5%, which if you guys remember in the past couple of my vids, I did mention, or past couple of my videos, I did mention that southwestern parts of Texas could potentially get a 5% added for them, whether it was today or tomorrow, and there's the 5% that has been issued out for today. So we're really going to have to monitor this storm as this continues to progress overnight into tomorrow. But for right now, let's monitor it as to what it could do today. Here's the simulated reflectivity based off of the HRRR. I know I said that I'm not going to use the HRRR for dry line setups, but none of the models have really been saying anything other than what the HRRR has said. As a matter of fact, the HRRR has started to uptrend significantly. So we're going to be using the HRRR for our analysis here. But you can see here by 1 p.m. Central Daylight Time, which is indicated up here at the top, storms are starting to become a lot more widespread. They're not strong, but they're just a lot more widespread. You also have some storms that are firing off here in Colorado, and that's going to be pushing off towards the east, maybe northeast. But then more of your storms start to form here near the Wichita Falls area, near the Lawton, Oklahoma area. So more of these storms, as this continues to progress, will begin to bubble up and bubble up. You also have more storms up here in Colorado that are more or less moving northeast, now almost north. And this is what's going to basically be your tornado risk here at 5 p.m. Central Daylight Time, 4 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, right within that general vicinity of the 2%. But more of your storms will begin to fire up. As I said, 5 p.m. is when they'll most likely begin to pop off here, and then they'll continue to move on through towards the general vicinity of southern to central parts of Oklahoma. You also have more storms that begin to form here just to the east of Abilene, and this is something that we're going to have to monitor as things continue to progress. And another thing we're going to have to monitor is how some more storms end up forming just to the west of where the original storms formed, so basically to the east of Amarillo and Lubbock at this moment. And as that continues, you can see how these storms continue to move over basically the same areas that were just impacted 4 hours prior. And so really something we're going to have to watch out for, and especially since more and more of these thunderstorms are supposed to form, this is definitely something we're going to want to monitor. You guys also are going to want to pay attention down here, because this is one of the first times I'm going to mention Del Rio. A lot of the models have been pretty consistent with a very unstable environment down here in southern Texas. CAPE amounts, which is the convective available potential energy, have reached an upwards of almost 4,000 to maybe even 5,000 joules per kilogram within these areas, which you only need 2,000 in order to get thunderstorms, really. So the fact that there is stuff like this that's happening tells me that the environment is primed for severe weather, even regardless of tornadic potential. But when you add wind shear to the mix, then you can have some very high chance of tornadoes, maybe even strong tornadoes down here. So we're going to have to watch that. And especially into Wednesday, we're definitely going to want to watch the threat for tornadoes, maybe even some strong ones down there. So definitely something to keep in mind with all of that. But as it continues to head all the way into the overnight hours, you can see storms really become a lot more widespread. You still have some thunderstorms down here that could be severe, and that'll continue to linger all the way out through the night. But it's, for the most part, going to be the same old story where thunderstorms begin to develop, more of them continue to push off, and it'll just be a constant cycle of that all the way until the end of Wednesday. Dew points, for the most part, you can see the moisture in the atmosphere is really good. I like to attribute to, in some instances, where if you have relatively moist dew points, you typically have a lot of moisture at the surface. And in most situations, it means you have a lot of energy. And in this case, you do have a lot of energy in the southern parts of Texas, but for the most part, dew points are really good across the board here. Some dew points here in Texas get up to the 70s. Others in Oklahoma get up to the mid to upper 60s. So really moist here, to say the least. You also have a dry line set up here to where you can see how steep the temperatures, not temperatures, the dew points actually drop off. So this can indicate that if you have thunderstorms that develop within here at any time, that they could produce some very large hail. And that's the reason why the Storm Prediction Center has issued a hatch for severe hail. So, just to, confirm what they're looking at, this is exactly what we do not want to see if you don't want to see large hail. Wind shear here, this is the 500 millibar jet. Across the board, you can see that it's relatively decent. You have some wind shear in upwards of 60 knots. Some of these, brighter oranges to darker oranges, even into red, indicate 70 to 75 knots. But for the most part, it's pretty consistent that the wind shear at the upper levels will be relatively decent. The low-level jet's the same as always. It comes out from the south, and it's decently strong for the most part. So the chance for tornadic potential, I'd say the highest chance would be that 5% up here in the north. Not sure if that area will be upgraded, just based off of how the models have been showing where the storms will form, but definitely something we're going to have to monitor, especially with what's coming out of these environments and what the soundings are. So this right here is a sounding that I found in the same area here in Wichita Falls. So not a bad environment here at all. You have decent amounts of CAPE and upwards of almost 3,000 joules per kilogram. Your lapse rates are actually not that bad. As I said, your dew points are pretty good, being in the upper 60s. And you also have, as I said, your CAPE is pretty good. Your veering with your hodograph, you would want good veering, which means change in direction of the winds with height. So as you go further and further along with this line in the hodograph, this actually shows you that it changes directions and wind speeds. But this is more or less something to where if you were to track your weather balloon, say you were like right here, right at this red dot, and you had like a radar to track your weather balloon, this is almost exactly the same path that it would take if you were to see it live on the radar, like where it would go and stuff like that. So by seeing it change directions and curl off to the right or veer off to the right like this, this is basically what you want to see for tornadic potential, and you have that there near Wichita Falls. You also have another sounding like this here. This is from the NAM, or the NAM 3K, which actually has been very much so kind of a downplayer for this event. I actually won't say downplaying, because it's the NAM, as I said, does a pretty good job with depicting dry line setups, but the NAM 3 kilometer really does not want this event to happen at all here on Tuesday. I mean, you still have your veering. It does curl off to the right. Your ventilation's actually pretty good for the most part. But what makes this an issue is your capping inversion. And you can find it right here in your CINH. Anytime your surface values get below negative 60, I was about to say above, but I realized negative values don't work that way. But anytime you get below negative 60, so like negative 100, for instance, then you can forget about having thunderstorms that can produce tornadoes. You might have the chance for some large hail, but in all honesty, it's not all too likely. And a good example as to how capping inversion works on a thunderstorm is, I'm going to grab a water bottle here. I'm going to like plug it up. There we go, filled it up with water. We're gonna go full screen, and the best way for me to describe as to how this all works is, here's the water bottle, all right? If I were to take the lid off and squeeze the water bottle would obviously compress because of all the energy that's shooting out of it and all the compression from my hand. But if I keep the lid on, it doesn't pop off, does it? And that's what the limiting factor of thunderstorms actually do. It actually holds that lid and keeps the thunderstorms, which would be the air in the water bottle, from rising and developing into these strong thunderstorms. So if it has that lid and it's a strong lid, then it will pop. But if you have a a lid, but a relatively weaker amounts of lid. Let me pop up my water bottle again. You apply a lot of force and energy to it. What I'm doing is I'm currently twisting my water bottle here. I know I'm making a mess of my room, but I'll clean it up later. If I create a lot of energy, you can see the lid starts to bowl. And whenever that happens, you know, especially with a lot of force, that tells you that either A, you know, it's really capped, or B, it's about to break. But since the lid is super strong, you know, it's pretty capped, and that there isn't a lot of thunderstorm activity that's going to push on through. And you can actually see that in clouds. If you look up Pyleas cap, you'll actually be able to see the same representation as to what I'm doing here with this water bottle. But if you if you have a weaker lid and you pop it out, your thunderstorms can rise ever so explosively, just like that steam did, that condensation did from the actual water bottle there. And that's what can create your very strong supercells to be able to mature and be able to become really explosive and dangerous in nature. So something that we'll have to be mindful of going into this video later on, because there are some soundings that do have those characteristics, and we'll talk about that later on. Then we also have the wrap. This is the wrap model that we're going to be using as well. This is a cam model, convective allowing model. So this actually is similar to the HRRR. And this actually has a pretty good setup here for Del Rio here tonight. This is in Del Rio, by the way. And so you can see your veering is very good as long as it curls off to the right. It does pretty well for itself, and the ventilation is pretty good, or at least I think this is in Del Rio. Either that or it's in Wichita Falls, but both of these areas have the same profile for winds, that it's practically the same thing. I'm going to say it's Wichita Falls, more or less. I probably should have indicated where it was, where these soundings were taken up here, but yeah. I think they all were Wichita Falls, though, but your veering is pretty good with your hodograph, so this indicates that this could be tornadic. Your cape is very good so far. You know, just by looking at this, it's almost 3,000 joules per kilogram. You also have your capping inversion, which at the surface is below -60. Mixing layer doesn't really matter all too much. As long as the surface is below -60, then your chance for explosive supercellular development is possible. Your lapse rates are pretty good for the most part, which could indicate that these storms could be dumping some very large amounts of hail, maybe even large, big amounts of hail, if you know what I mean. So the possibility for that is there for this event here today, and we're definitely going to have to be mindful as to what the models continue to trend towards. Because as I said, if I do live stream and the models continue to look something like what the wrap's doing, we could have a pretty big tornado event that will happen to not impact anyone, and that'll be pretty good for storm chasers. All right, let's take a look into Wednesday. Here is Wednesday's outlook, the day 2 outlook. You can see here a massive slight risk, which includes Wichita Falls, Oklahoma City, Dallas, Fort Worth, Abilene, Waco, Austin, San Antonio, Del Rio again. So if you guys live in these areas, you really have to monitor this. You also have a marginal risk, which extends all the way up into the northeast, all the way through the Ohio River Valley into the Mississippi River Valley. So the potential for some severe weather is here as well, especially up here in the northeast, where there actually could be a chance for tornadoes. But for the most part, everywhere else that's, you know, in this marginal risk, most likely we'll see some gusty winds and some spotty hail. But we'll talk about the northeast here again later on in the video. Here's your hail risk, and I've been saying that southern parts of Texas since the beginning of the video was going to have a lot of energy, you know, tremendous amounts of energy. And the Storm Prediction Center agrees with us. It's just absolutely insane what the parameters are down near Del Rio is. And just based off of the amounts of Cape there, you could potentially get a very strong supercell. All risks are possible with that cell if it does develop, including tornadoes, which I do want to mention here real quickly. Well, actually, you know what? I'll mention it when we get to the tornado risk, but large hail is possible here within the storm. Otherwise, for the most part, across the board here in Texas and Oklahoma, just a 15% chance for storms. But as I said, significant risk for hail, 2 inches or greater within that black box with the dotted lines. Everywhere else, whether you're in a 5% or a 15%, you have that probability of seeing 1 inch size hail or larger. Then you also have your wind risk. This is not as large as the hail risk, but you still have your 5% indicated in brown, your 15% indicated in yellow. And so whatever probability you have that chance of getting 58 mile per hour wind gusts or greater. So something to keep in mind with all of that. Then you also have your tornado risk, and this is pretty interesting. You can see here that there's another 5% chance for tornadoes here in Wichita Falls. I completely agree with that. I also think that this could also be extended. I also think that the 2% chance for tornadoes, if I were to make this greenish, I also think this could be extended a bit further like this, maybe. Or to some sort of extent, something like this. And then I think that the brown could potentially be extended to something like that. But we're going to have to watch it close as this continues to move on through, because I'm watching a lot of prefrontal convection here in eastern parts of Oklahoma. And I'm pretty sure they didn't put it up there quite yet because they don't really, they're still pretty, like, confused as to what will happen today and how that will translate to tomorrow. But I am counting on some prefrontal convection to happen here in eastern parts of Oklahoma, western parts of Arkansas. And so I would not be surprised if there's an expansion there. You also have your 2% chance for tornadoes here in the Northeast. This is what I was talking about for the chance for tornadoes. I will be doing timings for you all towards the latter stages of the video. So you'll definitely have to watch out for that. But the chance for tornadoes is not out of the question for you all by any stretch of the imagination. So we'll talk about that in a bit. And then last but not least, the chance for tornadoes here near San Antonio. San Antonio is not exactly in it, but it's like right on the border. But Del Rio 100% is in it. And Del Rio, if you're watching this video, you guys are going to be hit by some very strong storms for 2 days in a row. And I'd highly recommend you guys have a plan of action whenever this stuff does come across your way. So I said I most likely will be live streaming, Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, I most likely will be live streaming because of the 5% chances for tornadoes. But I'm saying right now that this, I would not be surprised if got increased to a 10% chance for tornadoes. I would not be surprised as well if they included a significant risk for tornadoes right within this area. So this is definitely something we're going to want to watch out for as time continues to progress here with the model runs. All right, let's take a look at the timings here. As I said, the time is up here at the top. We're going to be talking about the plains first, and then we'll get into the Northeast later on. But you can see the storms continue to linger from the previous event from Tuesday across the board here. And this is going to basically continue for the most part. I mean, you still have storms that form over here, just to the south and east of Brownwood, just to the south and west of Dallas-Fort Worth. So you still have some storms that'll continue to linger, but then this is what I mean by the prefrontal convection. You have the first line of storms that are right here, and this is further east of Wichita Falls. I mean, this is almost out of the 5% chance for tornadoes, and you have a lot of convection here that is developing, including a couple discrete cells that are out here just to the west of Fort Smith in Arkansas. So this is definitely something we're going to have to monitor, and I would not be surprised if those storms gathered supercellular characteristics and maybe even produced a brief tornado or something like that. But one thing that I want to talk about from this slide right here to the next one, 2 areas of development. We have one area of development right here, which is our main line that's going to cause our tornado risk here for Wednesday. So this is by 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time. It's near Frederick, Oklahoma, Wichita Falls, all the way down to the west of Abilene. That general vicinity could potentially see some tornadic development. And then I also want to talk about this cell right here, or these cells. But this cell in particular, this one cell here near Del Rio, if it does go over Del Rio directly, there could be some big impacts in regards to very large hail, some very strong gusty winds, and even a possible tornado. But for the most of the models have been picking up on an highly unstable environment here for Del Rio. And, you know, Del Rio is not a shabby city. Del Rio has quite the population. You know, I believe it has an upwards of what? Above 30,000 people, maybe a little bit more than that. So, you know, it's not by any stretch of the imagination a shabby city here in the United States, especially along the border. So if there is something that forms off of there, I would not be surprised if, you know, you could have impacts within there. A lot of storm reports from those storms. So we're definitely going to have to monitor this as this continues to move on through. And especially by late evening, look at this. Look at these lines of storm that begin to form here in Oklahoma, all the way up to Oklahoma City and even into Tulsa. Look at these lines of storms here in Del Rio all the way into Mexico. Large scale event here of storms that really start to push off. And it kind of turns into a MCS as well, a QLCS within, well, supercellular characteristics within a QLCS. So I would not be surprised if you saw some supercells within the line. You even see some discrete cells within a line, a broken line QLCS, if you will. So something really interesting to monitor as this continues to progress. And San Antonio could potentially see some risks later on in the evening, as well as places like Dallas, Fort Worth, and even Austin. So really something we're going to have to be mindful of as well. You also could be potentially seeing some risks up here in Kansas, in Kansas City as well. So storms could be forming and could be pushing through your area by the latter stages of the evening. Not exactly sunset-ish, maybe, but you could still see some thunderstorms that could push on through your area. So I'd definitely be mindful of that. And then this really does turn into more of a consolidated line as you get more and more into the overnight hours past midnight as well. But one area I do want to talk about for timings, because I know there's going to be quite a few people here, is Dallas-Fort Worth. Most of you might be able to tell based off of the terrain, this is indeed Dallas-Fort Worth. There's Dallas, there's Fort Worth, Arlington somewhere in the middle. But if you take a look at the timings here for most of you, according to this model, you guys could be getting some scattered storms at around 9, and then the real action really starts to come on through at around midnight. And some of the models could say, some of the other models say a bit later on than that, maybe at around 2 to 3 o'clock in the morning. But for the most part, you guys could get some strong action with this gusty line here that moves on through. And the potential for some severe weather does exist here in Dallas-Fort Worth overnight. I don't think this will be as much of a tornado risk here. I think this will definitely be a gusty wind threat, maybe some more spotty hail, but I really don't think that the tornado risk will be as high as the other two I'd mentioned. So something to keep in mind with that if you live in Dallas-Fort Worth. Dew points, really moist across the board here. I mean, look at this. You have dew points in Oklahoma that are in the 70s. The 70s. That's really moist. You have some dew points here in northern parts of Texas that are in the upper 60s to 70s. That's really moist. You have dew points in Del Rio that are in the mid 70s. I see 73 and 74 there. That is moist. That is very moist. I'll say that much. I mean, how else am I supposed to, you know, describe how moist this is? It's just very, very unstable environment here on Wednesday. And that's kind of the reason why I've been saying that Wednesday is going to be a lot worse here than Tuesday. And just by looking at the models, this does seem to be coming into fruition. So we're going to have to watch out for this set of storms that'll move on through here on Wednesday. Low-level jet. It's pretty strong throughout the day. I mean, this is more towards the morning-ish. Well, not the morning-ish. Well, like the infancy stage of these storms. I wanted to talk about the prefrontal convection that was in eastern parts of Oklahoma, because I actually do think it will happen. And the reason why I think it will happen is because of how the low-level jet is intense here within these general vicinities. I mean, most of the models have been picking up on how intense this low-level jet has been here, especially into Oklahoma. You have some low-level jet amounts in upwards of 50 to almost 60 knots, which is pretty insane. So, you know, if there are storms that form often here, I would not be surprised that there was some very strong tornadic development. You also have some low-level jet characteristics here near Del Rio that are in upwards of, say, 20 to 25 knots. Would not be surprised if it actually got higher than that, but because it's a relatively inland, I don't expect it too high. So I would say at least 25 knots, which is around 30 miles per hour to be a safe bet. But the one reason as to why Del Rio is a threat here for this event is because take a look at the wind shear here. I mean, anytime we were talking about the prefrontal convection, and there's a chance for it. You have, some wind shear amounts that are in the 60s to maybe even the mid to upper 60s. But the wind shear here in Del Rio is pretty consistent. Upper 60s to 70s here. And if you get some thunderstorms that can develop within this general vicinity, then by golly, you could have some tornadic development with those cells. So really something we're going to have to watch out for as time continues to progress. All right. I want to talk about these soundings here real quickly. And it's pretty interesting to say the least, because this here is in, I believe, the prefrontal convection here in Oklahoma. There is some veering with these storms. What we want to look for here with this hodograph is how things continue to curl off to the right. So as I described with the previous analysis, if you have a radar right here and you're tracking the weather balloon that you let go and it tracks where it goes, you can see how it starts to go north and then it curls off to the northeast and then it does a bunch of squiggly lines. That's exactly what you want to see here with this red line and how it curls off to the right. And so the tornadic potential is here. You also have CAPE numbers that are approaching 2,000, so you could have some supercells that could be strong as well. The only thing that is really limiting the event from happening in the eastern parts of Oklahoma is the lapse rates. You would typically want it to be 6.5 and above, and the 3 to 6 kilometer lapse rate is just a little under 6. So it's not, I mean, you have the chance for tornadoes. LFC and LCL are as low as it can possibly be. You have the chance for hail as well if it does form, but just sustainability comes into question here when I look at this sounding, especially with the amount of CAPE that it has. Then we also have this setup here with the NAM 3 kilometer. I believe this is also with the prefrontal convection as well. So this is definitely something we're going to have to monitor, but as I said, lapse rates lack a lot to be desired, so it's definitely something we're going to want to watch out for. I did not put a sounding for whatever reason for Del Rio, so real quickly, we're going to take a sounding there. We're going to use the RAP, because the RAP's been, pretty adamant about this situation, in general. So we're going to take a look at that real quickly. And here's what the RAP says. And it's not all too good, because by looking at that does not look pretty healthy, doesn't it? Doesn't it? It looks pretty scary for the most part, actually. And you'd be right in assuming that it's scary, because When significant tornado parameter values are really above 5, that's when I start to monitor. And it's in 6. It's in the 6, so that's not exactly the best case scenario here. But let's take a sounding here, right within the heart of it, and you can see perfect veering. This is a hodograph that I would attribute to long track storms within this general vicinity. Isn't as much CAPE as it once said, but it's forecast to be 4,000 joules per kilogram, so I guess that doesn't really matter a whole lot. The sounding is a bit elevated, so I will admit that, but the capping inversion seems to be all right. Actually, let me zoom this in here for you all. There you go. So capping inversion is below 60, so you could have explosive development with these storms here in Del Rio, which is the reason why I said we really got to watch out for these storms. CAPE, for the most part, is pretty good. I guess I was downplaying it a little bit when I said it's like not as much as I thought it was. Around 3,000 joules per kilogram is still a lot of energy. So, regardless of that, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. And then your lapse rates are decent because they're around 6.5 and above. So you have your chance for some tornadic development with these cells here in Del Rio. As I said, I would not be surprised if the Storm Prediction Center introduced a 10% significant risk for tornadoes down in Del Rio, just by how much energy and what the wind shear looks. It looks pretty good across the board, and would not be surprised by any stretch of the imagination. But let's take a look now here at these storms in the Northeast. Moving on to a lesser risk, not as much of a massive tornado risk, but still has the chance for it. Let's go to the timings here for the Northeast. And you can see, as usual, we have our timings up here at the top screen. So if you want to follow along, please be sure to do so. A lot of thunderstorms really start to form on through here. They just passed through Erie, just passed through Cleveland earlier on in the day. So the chance for storms across the board here is possible. Pittsburgh, I'd really watch out for this as well. But then as this continues to move on through, then it starts to become a bit more of a consolidated line. And this is really not exactly the main risk for tornadoes. The reason being is because this actually kind of just carries the moisture with it behind. It's almost as if it's like the warm front is right within this general vicinity, and the storms that could potentially form behind it could bring in the tornado risk. But you still have some widespread storms that could form on across the board. Geez, I almost said Rockville. Oh my goodness. Rochester, you guys could be getting some storms at around 3 or 3-ish. That could continue to push on through. And then Utica and Rome, you guys could be getting some stuff. Syracuse could be getting some stuff at 4:30, 5 o'clock, stuff like that. But then this is where things get interesting. As State College gets their storms at around 5, more storms to begin to develop. And this is most likely going to be your tornado risk from 5 p.m. And further later on. These lingering storms that'll occur after these main line of storms that'll produce your gusty winds and maybe even some spotty hail. You could have the potential for something to be tornadic along here. And as this continues to move on through areas north and east of Pittsburgh, and just the north and west of State College, or even north of State College, all the way up to Binghamton, really, could have the threat for tornadoes here, heading towards sunset. So really something we're going to have to monitor. But then as they head further south and as they get closer and closer towards midnight, the storms start to kind of dissipate a bit more. They're not as strong, but they still linger throughout the evening, if you can get my drift here. So definitely something that if you're in the mid-Atlantic, you're going to want to watch out for. Dew points within these areas, you can see how moist it is in the beginning of the day. 17Z translates to about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's relatively moist here in places like Ontario and Cleveland. And, if this is at like 1 o'clock, then, you would assume that it would be not as moist, with thunderstorms passing on through. But this is actually the thunderstorms that's carrying all the moisture. You can see how dry it is here across Pennsylvania and New York. Mid-50s, well, low to mid-50s across the board here. And so as this continues to move on through to like the 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock hours, it goes from this to this. And you get dew points that are in the mid to upper 60s in some of these areas. And so that's the reason why there's the chance for tornadoes, is because you have some really good moisture within these areas that could potentially produce cells. And with veering already in itself, we have wind shear here, the low level jet, decent. Here's the veering for the most part. And then at the lower levels, so here's your lower level wind shear. Here's your upper level wind shear. Oh yeah, that's right. I had to, sorry for blinding you all, but I had to actually like take a larger scale sample size because they didn't have it in the smaller scales. But the veering is actually kind of decent here in Pennsylvania and New York. And so if you guys live in South, I can't exactly call it South. I'd say more of western parts of New York, as well as northern or northwestern parts of Pennsylvania, even central parts of New York as well. You guys really need to watch out for this. And here's actually a sounding that I took from these storms here. And you can see how this does veer off towards the right as you would typically want it to do. So you do have some tornadic potential here with the hodograph. You have decent amounts of CAPE and upwards of 2,000 joules per kilogram. You also don't have as much capping inversion, so this could create some explosive development. Your lapse rates are pretty good from the surface to 3 kilometer, but your 3 to 6 kilometers isn't really all too good. So we'll definitely have to keep that in mind, especially as we get closer and closer to Wednesday. So that's going to be it for me, guys. If you guys have any questions, please leave them down below in the comments. I'll try and get to them as much as possible before I possibly live stream here later on this evening, which I most likely will. So stay tuned for that. Turn on notifications for that. Please be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video. It helps me a lot. It also helps me get onto other people's recommended feeds so that more people can get information. But it also helps me with my analytics and helps me grow faster. So that is greatly appreciated. Subscribe if you're new, if you haven't already, because I do analysis like this. I do in-depth analysis on all of these events, including tropical weather when we get to it. Keyword when we get to it. So if you guys are excited for that, feel free to stick around. And then follow me on social media, or all my social medias. I have a Twitter, which if you guys ever find, I'll ask frequently on stream that if you guys find stuff on Twitter, feel free to share it with me. Just at me, like put a comment on it on the actual post and then at me so that I'll be able to go over to it. Or join my Discord server. We have 650 members strong. We talk about weather. We try to enhance our weather skills, but we also kind of chill out whenever there's no weather. We just, kind of talk about anything and everything as well at the same time. So we're a off-topic weather chat, more or less, but we also try to enhance each other's skills and try to make each other better. So if you guys feel like that's something that you would like to participate in, the Discord server link is in the description down below. That's going to be it for me. My name is Nate. I also go by HockeyBoy8, and I will catch you guys most likely in my live stream later on tonight. So peace out, everyone. Take care.